Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to Looking Ahead, the series where I break down and analyse the meta, what's happening over in Japan, and how that'll impact R1. Today we're going to look at something very exciting, how the meta is starting to shape up in Japan in time for Worlds in about a month's time. So we're going to look at some of the tier lists and look at exactly what are the top decks and kind of which are the ones which you could potentially keep on the radar and kind of entering that tier 3 sort of bracket. I know we're going to see some 151 cards, but we kind of have to really disregard some of them as they won't in fact be legal by the time we have Worlds, and by the time we have our set release, it's going to be after Obsidian Flames, which is definitely a little bit of a disappointing thing. So let's jump into this video. So if we have a look here at this tier list, this is something definitely interesting to see exactly what are the F tier and B tier, so the tier 1 and tier 3. In Japan, they do a best of 1, unlike our best of 3. So sometimes you can see some decks are definitely a little bit more different in their sort of deck building. So we do see that up there in tier 1, we do see Gardevior and Lugia. Definitely a little bit of surprise because in our sort of capability, we have Lost Box and Gardevior up there as a tier 1 sort of bracket. Tier 2 is definitely the Lost Box package, both the Sableye and like the Turbo version, and Giratina, Miraidon, Mew, and Xianpao. Definitely Miraidon and Xianpao a little bit surprising, but to be fair, in their best of 1 setting, Miraidon is definitely going to be a lot more quicker as they're going to more of the flapping Raichu sort of build instead of the big Regieleki, very vulnerable to being easily one-hit KO'd. And like the tier 3, we're seeing the Archetypes, the Rapid Strike Box, Zoroark, and Blastoise. Those two ones there definitely are the ones, unfortunately, we won't be looking at as they focus primarily on using 151 cards. Using, obviously, Blastoise EX is a 151 EX, and Zoroark uses a much more very consistency booster of the Dodrio, which is easy to draw cards and put damage counters on. So unfortunately, we're not going to look at those ones. We're just looking at the other sort of decks here, and definitely some bit of a surprise. Mew kind of being in tier 2 is definitely weird to see Mew being quite a bit further down, but they are focusing definitely a bit more on the likes of the Turbo sort of build on there by using the likes of double turbo energies instead of the Fusion Strike one, as I feel like Fusion Strike is still very much popular. For us, I would probably say that's probably the way which you should potentially go around it, as Ting-Lu is quite a bit scary and obviously Spiritomb. Having a Rapid Strike Box and Arctina down quite low is not really too surprising. They do have a lot more focusing on our results than they used to, but unfortunately haven't been retranslated yet in some of the events that are happening around there. And Lost Box kind of being that tier 2, but the high tier 2 bracket isn't really too surprising at times, as the likes of Gardevoir and Lugia kind of can be a bit more disruptive. Lugia, in fact, is actually going towards the more colorless build, not going the single strike, which we've seen a lot of great success over for us, but focusing more on the colorless build, having the likes of Snorlax, Luxray, and there is unfortunately, the likes of Mew EX, which is very powerful for them to copy any of the opponent's active move. So let's jump in to see exactly what some of these lists look like, which you could potentially be thinking about for Worlds. So this here is a very simple, very straightforward Gardevoir list, which I believe, in fact, did get the top 8 placement in the latest huge tournament over in Japan. Nothing really too surprising here, but I really do like having the higher counts of those stadium counts. Having 3 outs of them is really, really strong, but unfortunately does not play the likes of Worker. So they don't have a guaranteed like support account to get rid of Path to Peak. Only having 3 outs to it isn't too bad. Claps is very powerful to go against the likes of the Lost Box deck, so you're not exactly going to be too worried about all the bench damage counters all over on the board. And obviously, the likes of Temple of Sinnoh is powerful to shut down off the other opponent's reversal energy, but also the likes of slowing down Lugia. We again seeing the Scarlet and Violet version of Rolts, which is very powerful, especially in the mirror match, as you can use a 70 HP Rolts to KO a Gardevoir Shining Arcana. They are going with the 10-1 split of energies, and we are kind of seeing this very popular. These were obviously in the top 4 results at NEIC. Both Calvin and Rowan did, in fact, I believe, play the 10-1 split of reversal and psychic energies. Could we potentially see this as a trend? One copy of Switch I do like, because purely on the basis it's a way to go around the likes of Marwell and any sort of disruptive elements with that way, try and lock down any of the Pokemon out in the active spot, more specifically the Greninja, because unfortunately it cannot be moved and only because of any energy attachment can't be attached to it, and it can't really attack. The rest of it is very sort of simple, what we kind of had seen, and then we are seeing a lower count of the likes of Fog Crystal, we are seeing 2 of, but then we're obviously adding a Switch and no Power Pad because they're playing 3 copies of Boss's Orders. Spiritomb I do like, and we are seeing that fit in a lot more in Gardevoir EX. Definitely something to be kind of like contenders in there. Not only does it shut down your own Zacian, but slowing down the opponent's Luminions, as well as the likes of Genesect V is very, very powerful. The other tier 1 deck is Lugia, and here we can see the colorless build. And yes, I know I did say we're not looking at 151, but there is this Mew EX in here, and I will kind of talk to you exactly why that sort of build is much more stronger right now. We can see here it's definitely focusing more on the Weirdeer and Snorlax, and I was definitely really hyped in this colorless build. It hasn't really had any big results, but in these gym challenges, it is getting quite a few top placements and actually being one of the most dominant sort of decks in there. This deck here definitely focuses a lot more on the colorless energies, using Snorlax as kind of like doing those one shots, those two-shotting sort of things, but doing 180 and having the therapeutic energy to make sure that it's not in fact getting going to sleep, so you're constantly being attacking, and having double Lumineon makes it easy to get any of your disruptive cards like your 4 copies of Boss's Orders, or easy to get Professor Barnett to discard any of your Archeopses. I do like having Drapion here because not only is it really good into UV Max, you can also reuse it in the likes of Gardevior EX to get those big one-hit kills, and then by loading up with lots of colors energies. As you only play 4 doubles of double turbo, you can use other sort of energies as well, like the V-Guards, Jet Energy is obviously therapeutic and gift, to make sure you can really get those big attacks straight away. I really like Luxray, especially in these decks. I think Luxray is definitely one of those hit or miss cards. I've seen people rate it as really high, but unfortunately we haven't really seen the results really like justify how powerful Luxray really is. But the ability to just pretty much put it down if you're on your bench as soon as you're behind in price, attach reversal energy and hit 180, i.e. KOing every single Lugia V-Star out in play is very, very powerful. I do like some of the cards in here which they have chosen. The likes of Bravery Charm is very good to make sure though the likes of Drapion and even Lumineon or even a Weirder have very, very high HP. More specifically, Snorlax's 200 HP on a basic Pokemon is very, very good. I know I didn't say I would talk to you too much about Mew, but Mew is very, very powerful. Not only is it good to draw some cards in it, it also makes you copy any of your opponent's active Pokemon on like attack, obviously with the same necessary entry requirements, i.e. you can pretty much use that loss impact from the likes of Giratina to do 280 damage, which is very, very good. I like some of the other attacks like Echoing Horn, pretty much going to reuse any of the other attackers in there. And having Avery is very powerful to kind of slow down those Gardevoir while making sure we're not being as consistent with all of their draw supporters. And a 2-2 line of Stadium Split, kind of and rounding up to 4, is very good because you want to try and get that Path to Peak out as way as quickly as possible so you can use your Lugia V-Star. So those are definitely the two sort of like big sort of archetypes here. I think Lugia is definitely very powerful in the colorless build. Potentially we could see this in Worlds because we are seeing that much more trend over in Japan. These people are going with playing these colorless build of Lugia, but obviously they don't have Mew, so that could potentially change some of their game style plan. Now going to some of the tier 2 list, we are looking at Lost Box, and we are seeing very much the trend of what we're seeing more common in these Lost Box sort of builds, playing the very high count of these big turbo build, the Pokestop, the Forest Steel Stone, the high counts of the Raikou as well as Dragonite. So try and draw through your deck as quickly as possible with the likes of Lost Vacuum to make sure you get to that magic 7 in the Lost Zone as quickly as turn 1, so you can do those big attacks and damage with the likes of Raikou and the Dragonite. I really do like these style of builds. I think there are sometimes like this is the way how Lost Box is going. Maybe this more turbo sort of build here. We obviously have been seeing a more common trend of Lost Box here. The Kyogre build, the Sablezard build, definitely kind of a little bit falling a little bit by the wayside, and the results in the gym challenge. And even if you look at our League Cups as well, we are seeing this turbo build become one of the most dominant versions. And I do like this style of build. For me, I'm not exactly huge these turbo sort of Lost Box sort of build here, but I can really see the justification of this style of list. For me, I'm definitely more of a Lost Zone Giratina build, and that's a deck which over in Japan, they absolutely love, and especially in a best of 1 format, can be absolutely devastating. We are definitely seeing, obviously, the more higher counts of Path to Peak in Giratina to really try and slow down the opponent as much as possible. I do love the double Roxanne +2 Iona. I think it's really, really powerful because the opponent could potentially see, oh, you've got rid of 1 Roxanne and 1 Iona when you've lost zoned it. I don't need to be worried too much about being disruptive, and they can go bam, bam, Iona, Roxanne, or even back-to-back others either way. It's really, really powerful, especially in these style of decks, which I really love in Giratina. The 4-3 line of Giratina is definitely a little bit more thicker than we have noticed in certain other builds, but I can justify with that having the 4 counts of that, because if you potentially may have a slow start, you can use it for the Abyss Seeking to get 2 cards in the Lost Zone as quick as possible. 1 Cramorant, we have seen that in quite common in here, and having the 4 copies of Nest Ball is definitely a bit of a surprise. I'm mainly playing with 3 copies of it, but I do like having that, but you could potentially take away one for an extra Cramorant, or more importantly, Spiritomb, which you are seeing quite a rise in play. I really like the style of deck. I think it's really interesting as well. I love Super Rod. I think Super Rod really helped Lost Zone Giratina. Potentially, we could see a Lost Zone Giratina perform well. It's played incredibly popular over in Japan, and it might actually see its first ever big placement in a while, which I absolutely love. Another deck here, which I want to talk to you about, which is kind of been quite popular from what I've seen over Japan, the videos I've been watching, also researching a lot of it. Miraidon EX is surprisingly having a bit of a comeback. Now, we have seen it a little bit more quieter in the sort of turnouts away. Like we had the big explosive thing in the Regieleki, the VMAX full build. We saw obviously the rise of the Raichu build and the Flaffing, and we're definitely seeing that more focus in here, and also playing the likes of the Zero Aura. The Zero Aura is not too bad. I think there's 30 damage, but 30 more if there is a stadium card in play. I believe it's 30 more, but I completely have just blanked on exactly why it is so powerful in that sort of case. But unfortunately, it does unfortunately fall a little bit slow because you're not getting those big one-hit kills, which is what Miraidon is kind of sort of used to in that sort of play. But the thing I do like about this style deck is you do in fact play the likes of the higher counts of Paths to Peak, slowing down the opponent as much as possible, making sure that you get your setup really popular with Miraidon, and then you put Paths to Peak in there. As you notice, I have shared a list of this a couple of weeks ago, and people definitely really like that style of build, and I think that is the way where Miraidon is going with it. High disruptive cards like the likes of Iona and Judge and Boss's Orders, high counts of Paths to Peak to really slow down the likes of Mew, Gardevoir, and Lugia, try and stop their setups, and they're very much playing the Raichu as well. So you do have that capability to get those big one-hit KOs if you want to by playing a 2-2 line of Flaffing. I think this build is definitely really fun. Bravery Charm, I'm always on the fence for Bravery Charm. You're playing it like you get 270 HP with Miraidon, 250 with both Raichu and Raikou, and then you go to 160 with Zero Aura. Yes, that's not terrible. Like you'd even attach it to Manaphy, go to 110, but you still get easy one-hit KO by all the things you're really scared about. So that's why I'm always like a bit like, you could play this as 2 EXP share, or potentially even like a Cleansing Gloves or a Choice Belt. But definitely this is the way where I think Miraidon is starting to build, kind of keeping up there being a tier 2 archetype. Another one is Mew VMAX. Here, like I said, they're going to more turbo build, playing the very high disruptor counts of high counts of Judge, Roxanne, and Path to Peak. We are seeing this Rocket Claw, again, one of the only other cards which is from the 151 set, which is really powerful. You get to look at your opponent's hand and put a Pokemon from there at the bottom of their deck. I quite like this. It's very good to slow down the likes of Mew and Gardevoir, not Mew, Gardevoir and Lugia, trying to slow down any of their setup, getting rid of their Lugia V-Star or potentially their Archeops putting it at the bottom of their deck, and obviously the likes of getting rid of any of the Curlies or Gardevoir pieces in Gardevoir to really slow down that sort of play here. We aren't seeing a huge increase of like Spiritomb as well as the likes of Tinglu over in Japan. That's potentially why the double turbo build of Mew is becoming the much more favored archetype. Now, that might potentially change obviously in Worlds. We are seeing a huge increase in Spiritomb in load of decks in the likes over for us in NAIC. We saw a load of Spiritomb as well, and kind of a sort of Radiant Alakazam as well. But Spiritomb was definitely quite a bit of a surprise factor in the sort of the meta game where everyone was preparing for. But we could potentially see the Mew builds kind of go back to the Fusion build purely on the basis of how it is a world tournament. And in Japan, this is the more popular build, but around the world, it's more Fusion build because they're more scared about ability lock. And obviously, Worlds, people create some crazy style lists here, so we could potentially see a Tinglu get broken into. So that might be why we might reverse back to the Fusion strike build. But this is definitely a good one to really talk about. And the last tier 2 archetype where I want to talk about is Qianpao. I really love Qianpao. I think it's definitely a deck which I found was absolutely really fun to play. I love the testing. Here we're seeing the 1-1 line of Palkia. We obviously saw to great success in top 16, the likes of having a 1-1 line of Arceus V-Star. I think this deck is very, very powerful. It does play the Counseling Clone, which I love because you can easily go around the Manaphy, try and like boss out there, get rid of the Manaphy, or have with the likes of Greninja, the Radiant Greninja to try and get those extra 2 prizes. That's why I really like this style, or potentially using the likes of Kyogre, doing 180 to one of the opponent's Pokemon. I think it's quite funny. Like here, we are seeing the increase of the Kyogre build, which we are seeing quite popular over in Japan, and it's definitely a deck which I really like in this sort of deck, but haven't really done too much testing with it. Only having 3 copies of the Superior Energy Retrieval is definitely quite a bit of a concern. I would have liked to see that plus like an Energy Retrieval, but we do see it teamed up with a Super Rod. But I think if you wanted to play this deck, you've got to play it to its full effect by playing those higher counts of that it's most possible for the Superior Energy Retrieval. The full area does 3 Iona, 3 bosses. Definitely we are seeing that sort of trend over there. But only playing 1 copy of Lost City with 2 copies of the Skaters Park is definitely very different. We are definitely seeing the likes of either high counts of Lost City or Pokestop, or just not really the Skater Park. Skater Park, I really like in my testing, making sure that you can pretty much double Qianpao and attach 4 energy instead of losing 2. I really find that's definitely really interesting. But Lost City is more impactful in the likes of Lost Box and the likes of these Gardevoir decks, really getting rid of any of those big threats out there. So definitely something which is a little bit interesting for these Qianpao archetypes. And obviously, Arceus Giratina is at a tier 3, which is definitely quite a bit strange. because we've always seen it very, very popular. So Arceus is definitely a little bit on a decline for its introduction. And we are seeing here, we are primarily seeing what we're used to. High council Path to Peak, high council Velocity, high council Disruptor card like Boss, Judge, and Iona, and heavy Spiritium as well to really slow down the opponent as much as possible. I do like how most of these decks here you are seeing one copy of Switch, one copy of Escape Rope, or one of each. People are still scared of Marwell. We haven't seen any Marwell appear in any of these archetypes, but Marwell can be pretty scary. The ability to trap anything in the active spot is really, really quite tough. With the likes of Bibero, has a 2 retreat cost, and even Spiritium as well, you can potentially get some attacks with it, but if you kind of try and get some attacks there, Marwell can pretty much easily get a one-hit KO with some of its attacks you have there. I like the copy of split between one Choice Belt and one copy of Cleansing Gloves. Cleansing Glove is really powerful, especially with the likes of Giratina. Not only can you get the KO on Gardevior, but also mute VMAX as well. Getting rid of both tier 1 and tier 2 archetypes is very, very powerful because Choice Belt helps you in every single other matchup. This deck is definitely something to be really considered and really kind of like feared about. It did in fact nearly get a obviously a top 8 placement at NAIC, but unfortunately there was a disqualification due to some sleeves. But unfortunately that doesn't stop there. It did in fact get a top 16 position. So we are seeing a bit of an increase in Arctina and also meta. We are seeing a little bit played obviously over in Japan. So definitely keep it on your radar. And the other one that we obviously want to literally touch on a bit is the Rapper Strike box here. Obviously, we did see Cyrus. She ended up winning NAIC. This list is very similar to her list as well, but there were a few sort of discrepancies and some differences in the style as well. Obviously, with the likes of Echoing Horn, I really love. And again, we're seeing the Escape Rope here, trying to make sure we always have that switching out for the likes of Radiant Alakazam. So you do have a way for you to kind of like move away with any of your scary Pokemon you have out and play. I really like this sort of deck here. I think it's definitely something good to little touch on as a tier 3 archetype. Now I just want to look at a meta share. This is the meta share kind of gone through results, looking over the weekend, which had over 2,000 results compiled all together to kind of like see exactly what decks were the most played. And these are definitely the top 7 archetypes, which you should really keep an eye on, as these are the ones which are performing quite well over in Japan. Lugia doesn't surprise anyone by actually being a top percentage, by being 12.7%. So definitely still a bit over the 1 in 10 chance of like hitting it, but definitely something you always keep a radar. Shein Power is a bit of a surprise. Same thing with Miraidon. These decks here definitely a bit of a fun like surprise archetypes by actually bumping into it. Shein Power had a huge successful weekend by actually jumping out quite a lot of places. It was kind of varying towards like the 5th and 6th most played. So jumping all the way to the 2nd place is something to be kind of like thinking about. People are testing it. People are playing Shein Power. So definitely something you should be considering about if you're going to Worlds to really keep that on the radar. Gardevior EX is at the 10%. Very bit low, but again, it's best of 1, but people are still playing Gardevoir. They are quite long games. You do have to play quite a lot quite quickly for Gardevoir, but being at 10% still means it is in that top sort of archetype. Lost Box decks is definitely at the 8% sort of range, both the Giratina and obviously the Sableye and the Turbo build. Something to always be considering about here. And then like Miraidon and Mew, kind of still up there. Miraidon still being nearing the 8% is a bit of a surprise where Miraidon basically faded completely, I feel like, after NAIC. No one's really playing Miraidon, but Miraidon is still pretty good over in Japan. People are still playing it. It's amazing, a best of 1 style format. So it's something to keep on playing. And Mew VMAX, again, it's been legal for what, nearly a year and a half, and people are still playing it. It's constantly evolving, constantly changing. So Mew VMAX is always going to be there. To finish off the episode, I will talk to you about 151 set. Why haven't I included it too much, and why is it going to really kind of like happen? Well, it's had very limited impact to some of the best decks. Why have I been saying that? Well, if you look at it, we've seen 2 archetypes, which is actually one of the top decks, which actually include any of these ones, that being Lugia and Mew. These ones are really powerful, by being Mew EX and the Team Rocket's Grabber are really powerful to really be disruptive or potentially use it for draw aspects and gain using any of your opponent's attacks. Also, the set won't be legal for Worlds. It's really sort of very different from us. We get it actually in September time, which won't be legal till October time, whereas Japan's had it for like nearly a month, which is a bit of a sad to see that it's going to be this huge sort of break. But then Obsidian Flames, we get it 3 weeks after its release date. We get that very, very soon, which I'm very excited to be covering it in a couple of weeks' time, which is actually crazy to think that in just a couple of days' time, we are going to be talking about some new cards, which could be impacting the format. But I've been very lackluster so far, and there's also been no big tournaments over in the 151 format. That being said, if we just look ahead to see exactly where this could kind of go with it, I potentially could see Shein Power will be staying on top. It potentially has the capability of that Shivering Chill and Hail Blade to do a huge amount of damage. The boxy style effect of other attackers like Palkia, it can still attack with Luminion, Kyogre, and obviously the likes of Radiant Greninja. Shein Power is in a pretty good position and potentially should be on your watch. Single Strike Lugia has disappeared. Will it return over in Japan? They obviously favor the colorless version of Lugia, and it's very, very powerful, but with no 151 and no Mew EX, could we see the return of single straight Lugia kind of be that much more prominent version and maybe a bit more stronger in a best of 3 sort of setting? And obviously the metal share, is it set in stone? Is Lugia, Xianpao, and Gardevior the top 3 decks, the ones which are always going to be there? I'm going to kind of be breaking down to that as we go and go close on to Worlds to really see exactly, give you the best insight into how the meta is starting to evolve. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, sorry I wasn't there last week, but NEIC was really, really popular. I wanted to kind of cover as much about it as possible. And obviously Japan's meta has kind of slowed down just a little bit as we're gearing up to Worlds and the lack of tournaments. So if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below what deck do you think is actually going to be performing well at Worlds. For me, I would love Xianpao and Miraidon to do well, as those are kind of like my pet, really love decks, but I could potentially see Gardevior be kind of like the most dominant archetype over in Worlds. Don't forget to join the channel. You can really help benefit exactly how the channel is going to be shaping up, and it means so much to me, and thank you so much for those who already are supporting the channel. I'll be back again in a couple of days' time for another video, and I will see you guys then. Bye for now.